Look, banks are gargantuan. And British GDP is 1.6 trillion pounds. The banks have assets which are 7 trillion pounds. But only 1% of those assets have been lent to support innovation in Britain. And only 3% actually for business lending. The rest of it is kind of residential mortgages, corporate mortgages, banks, credit cards, you name it. But it's not about kind of value generation in the business chain. And this is something that's been happening essentially for over 125 years, and it's culminated in the disaster of 2008. And actually, rethinking banking from first foundations, the amount of capital they hold, unwinding the conflicts of interest in many parts of their business, getting them to lend to wealth-generating, innovative business, being tougher on the terms on which they do residential mortgages. I mean, goodness me, it's a huge, huge agenda, which encompasses actually the way the Bank of England banks to the banking system, which is profoundly conservative, as are the risk weightings that are associated with various categories of lending, making it anti-enterprise. But I do think a financial transaction tax sits in the mix of kind of reforms that one could introduce potentially. It's the leverage that banks have undertaken against the amount of capital they have is stunning. And one of the reasons it's stunning is there's so much money to be made in buying and selling derivatives and various kinds of pre-existing financial asset. If you make a financial transaction tax on all of those transactions, you make it marginally less profitable. They have to hold more capital. At the same time, they'll actually start to deleverage, and then they'll start to focus on doing what they should be doing. So, the financial transaction is not just about raising money and kind of actually shrinking the shadow banking system. It's also about creating an incentive system for the banks to move to socially useful and economically useful forms of banking.
You deconstructed there really effectively some of the threats and some of the mythology of what would go wrong if we did anything to curtail the city or if we imposed a financial transaction tax. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, I do think that if a country like Britain, sterling is an important currency. It's not that important any longer. About 5% of all world trade is done in sterling. That's not untrivial. Similarly, the euro represents about a fifth of kind of world financial transactions. If you are a bank dealing in euro and you've got euro liabilities or euro assets or sterling liabilities or sterling assets, you need to have access to the central bank. The central bank prints the money that actually kind of underpins your activity, and at various times, day-to-day trading, day-to-day positions, kind of making your book square off at the end of the day, you need to have access to the central bank's what's called discount window. The bank can simply say, the European Central Bank or the Bank of England, you've got no access if you've been averting or avoiding the financial transactions tax. It just becomes an obligation you have to comply with, which is one of the reasons why the bankers are so keen not to have it. Is it going to shrink the City of London? The transactional side of it, yes. But the transactional side of the City of London, as actually the transactional side of finance worldwide, needs to be shrunk, as many bankers themselves concede. So, this is a... and we already have a financial transaction tax. We have something called stamp duty. It's been, bankers don't like it, but we have it. So, this notion of extending stamp duty to a wider range of transactions, which you can easily enforce, because you're the only person who can print money ultimately, the Bank of England or the European Central Bank. The arguments against it really don't stack up, and the reason why the banking sector is so against it is because they need this leverage and they need this volume of business to sustain actually their operations at their current scale. They should be shrunk.